Serious, actually.
I think I'm finally out of there. Moving on.
Don't move on. You just gotta expand everywhere.
I'm a Texas grower. I work in a road and everything.
We're good for life?
Okay.
Like young slices and we're doing it for a while, but I'm trying to do it like the old legal,
Oh, I get that. I have to keep everything on
Like
that.
on the blood,
Seven.
Yeah.
It becomes difficult.
Yeah, it's easier said than done there.
Yeah.
So, for reasons we're trying
We're
to
ready.
change.
Are we ready?
We're all
Yeah.
ready.
We're good. Don't break nothing down.
Good to go. We're live.
Do you want to turn the?
You're live? We're live. We are live. We're good to go. Right.
Just standing around on a live feed doing nothing.
I know, right? That's a camera there.
Yep, this is the camera that it's working on.
Okay, neat. So what are we on right now? We're on Facebook. And
We're on Arizona Normal YouTube, Facebook page, and then I'm also broadcasting online as well.
you got to set up the brand.
Oh, please be careful.
I know.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, I like that.
And
Good to
we're
go.
ready. Jump on the line.
All right. I think Allison, you're taking us.
All right. Second.
Hold this. Hold this.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to our December monthly chapter meeting. I am officially vice president
That's right.
of Arizona Normal. Todd is deputy director. AJ is secretary.
Yeah. Any messages?
Janae is
Making a
mess. What?
Making a mess over here.
Okay, besides that, what's your title?
Director of Public Relations.
And John is officially our president.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Allison, for the nomination. This is a real privilege, and it's also a little bit of an intimidating challenge coming in the wake of people like Mike Robinette, obviously the late great Michael Weiser. Some very big shoes to fill, to say the least. But I have a great team around me. I'm privileged for that. Lots of experience over to my left here, especially. And yeah, we look forward to continuing to do some great things for you.
We believe in you.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll go over to Todd with national news.
So we had the elections last month, and there was 5 states that were trying to legalize, and only 2 of them passed. We had Maryland, which is the 20th state with 66% of the vote.
Go Maryland.
And then Missouri with 50%. And the 21st state. So the other 3 states that rejected were Arkansas, North and South Dakota.
Boom.
Yeah, that's right. Not a good day to be a consumer in Dakota, as they just got rejected by their court last time around. And
Yeah.
Well, it's all oil based out there
I think the
too.
voters are sick
So
of it.
it's oil money that's running
You
it.
know? I don't know, but I would still vote for it. It's like shit. Why would?
Yeah, why not?
Why would you want to go to the next state over to get it? You know? But Rhode Island started selling. They if you remember in May, the legislature passed their own. The Democratic governor Dan, what's his name, passed it on May 26th, and then less than 6 months later, they started selling. 5 places started selling on December 1st, last Thursday. So if you're in the smallest state, Rhode Island, you can pop into one of the 5 dispensaries and pick up some weed.
5 dispensaries. I like that.
Right?
What are the chances?
Yeah. You remember, it's Christmas time. You could have family, you could be traveling over there for some reason. Yeah. I've never been there. I don't know even know what it's like over there. But.
It's cold.
Cannabis use is associated with health improvements in patients with treatment-resistant fibromyalgia. So they had a bunch of patients that had fibromyalgia. They tried all these different prescriptions and methods to treat the pain, and then they gave them some weed. overall help them. So that's one of the latest things to come out.
Yeah, it's a big deal too because there aren't really treatments for that. I think.
Yeah, that's a tough one to help with the pain. Just like it's real painful.
Yeah, my mom's got that.
Yeah. And then adult use legalization doesn't negatively impact crime rates. So the adaptation of state level marijuana legalization laws does not lead to any significant uptick in overall criminal activity, according to data published in the Journal of Drug Issues.
Who would have ever thought?
I've never heard of that one, but they come up with
Journal. I actually have heard of that.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's all we got for this month.
Not a bad one.
So
Not bad at all.
All right, and we recently just had an election,
That's right.
and this changed a lot of our,
A lot of the faces.
yeah, a lot of the faces in the legislation. So we'll let John go into that.
Yeah, so I'll do a little bit of a recap on the election. I'll start with something that's not exactly what you talked about, which is I'm wearing my Julie shirt, and I see Ron is wearing his Julie shirt. So that was our big disappointment of the election season. Well, a disappointment or a cause to be happy if you're looking forward to seeing more of Julie in your lives again. So Julie is coming back into the fold. Couldn't be with us here tonight, unfortunately, but she's got her eyes laser focused on a new record sealing law that's coming into effect in January. And yes, there's a lot of people across the state of Arizona that could really be helped by this. Lots of folks who want to get into the industry could be helped by this too, right? Because of the excluded felony prohibition for getting an FA license. So this is a really big deal. We're of course very proud of all the work that we've done with our expungements pursuant to Proposition 207. But we were always disappointed when folks come in and they were over that threshold of 2.5 ounces, 12.5 grams, 6 plants, what have you. So this will let us now go back and try to help a lot of those folks. So Julie's going to be coming back with us now. We're disappointed that we won't be seeing her in the county attorney's office, but we're happy we'll be seeing more of her in our Zoom meetings and our normal events. And that'll probably go for all of you as well. So there's one race. Let's focus on the other big ticket items. So just starting at the top, of course, I imagine you've all heard at this point, Governor-elect is going to be Katie Hobbs, unless there's something crazy and unforeseen with respect to the Carrie Lake legal challenge that may or may not be happening.
we're gonna hot elect leg.
Who cares?
So, in any event, yeah, that's big news, I think, for all of us here who are concerned, especially about our cannabis laws. Obviously, we haven't had a Democratic governor in Arizona for quite some time. I think the last one was Governor Napolitano, I want to say, and that was.
I think.
What was that?
02, I think.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, early 2000s or so. So we've had, ever since the marijuana programs have been created here in Arizona, they've been under Republican gubernatorial control, Republican Department of Health Services with Republican appointees. So this will be the first time that we see a Democratic politician in charge of the Department of Health Services. And I think there's a number of things to look at when it comes to changes we might see at the Department of Health Services under a Governor Katie Hobbs. I'll say one thing that I've been probably a mishmash between disappointed and laughing at, for example, is the Testing Advisory Council. There's a patient advocate seat that's reserved for a patient advocate on the Testing Advisory Council, but that seat has been filled for years, I don't know how many years, by someone who's literally a lobbyist for a brand. Yeah, I think that's right. Ever since it was created, it's been filled by an industry lobbyist in the patient advocate seat, basically, which I think is just, there's no rationale that makes any sense to support that. So that's one thing we're looking at. We are looking forward to meeting with Katie. I'm meeting with her and some other folks, I think later in December, if not that, then in January, to talk about the department, different things we should look at doing. I think that's really the big thing at the top of my mind is the Testing Advisory Council. Obviously, there's a lot of shortcomings with a lot of our marijuana laws. The rub is like trying to find those issues where the governor has the authority to move ahead and proceed. I often hear complaints about our licensing structure, but that's baked into our laws, so we need a new set of statutes to change those. But if anyone has ideas too, we're coming up to the beginning now of the legislative session. early January. Of course, Governor Hobbs will be taking office soon. Now's kind of the time. We've already talked about this, and I try to throw this out there a lot because I really do value the input that I get at these meetings. I think it's really important for our organization to make sure that we are well informed and we know what consumers are thinking. So if you've got any concerns about our rules, in particular, the Department of Health Services, and how it's applying our laws, now's a great time to talk with us because we do have meetings coming up on those topics. So with that, I think I'll leave the topic of the governor, and now kind of moving down the ticket, Attorney General. This I know is really important for especially folks who are concerned about DCS issues right now. There's been a notice of appeal filed for Ridgell v. DCS, where Julie Gunnigal talking about. Julie got her a great ruling in the Court of Appeals. The Attorney General filed a notice of appeal to bring that up to the Supreme Court, but with a new party again taking control of that office with well, I don't want to use that word, but it appears that way. I think there's a recount happening right now. I don't know that it's done yet, but last I saw, Chris Mays was in the lead there, ahead of Hamadeh, who's the Republican nominee. So that's another change of control at that office. Secretary of State, a little bit less relevant to what we do in part, except maybe initiatives, referendums. Fontes had a very big win there. And Treasurer, Kimberly E. I think that's a position that we never really think about a whole lot.
I do want to circle back to the original
She is a
DCS
Republican.
case.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, we have a Democratic, they might withdraw it. No, not really. The AG, DCS is a client of the AG. So the AG has to do what its client wants. And if DCS doesn't want them to withdraw, then the case has to go through. Because I got really super excited too. I was like, yes, they're going to withdraw the case. No, they're not going to withdraw it.
Well, we don't know.
We don't know, but.
Yeah. But in any event, that's still a pretty significant position where we've got some changing of the guard. It could also be, I think, important for enforcement of our criminal laws that do remain on the books. I know I've heard about certain people associated with the industry, and I think particularly the Arizona Dispensaries Association, trying to get the Attorney General to be more involved in prosecuting folks who were allegedly violating our Hemp Act with things like hemp-derived cannabinoids that are psychoactive. So I don't know. I know that the ADA also made very big contributions to Chris Mays. They contributed, I think, overall, like roughly $230,000 to Democrats, about $200,000 to Republicans. So kind of putting money, but betting on both sides more or less and trying to hedge their risk. Okay, turning to the legislature, we have a lot of new faces there, but in general, the structure is roughly similar to what we had in the last 2 years. In the Senate, it's 16 Republicans and 14 Democrats. House of Representatives is 31 Republicans, 29 Democrats. So again, a very close split. Again, for us, we need 75%. So one party having majority control by one vote can be helpful, but it's not really like we get everything we want then. So yeah, largely keeping track with that. Of course, Speaker Bowers is gone and out as Speaker of the House. He was primary from the right and lost, and that's that is big news for us. So when you look at the legislative process and like the reasons why various bills die, it's often not because of like a final vote. It's because of gatekeepers who block the bill at different steps. So bill gets introduced in the House in the last 2 years. What would happen? Speaker Bowers would refuse to assign the bill to committees. A bill can't get voted on without going through committees, so that bill is dead. Or he would assign it to a committee, and it would be usually Joanne Osborne's HHS committee, where she would kill it. And if it got through out of that committee somehow, you wouldn't put it on an agenda for a final vote. So there's all these different ways the leaders of a chamber can kill legislation. And with Speaker Bowers in the House, it was very, very hard to get anything through there at all. So there's the new leadership in the House, again, Republican control still. Representative Toma is going to be the Speaker of the House. I think that's pretty good news for us. Our new director of politics, Sarah Tyree, has known Toma for some years. When she first ran for office, she did it in his district, but didn't make it up to the general, so she never faced him directly. She actually gave Toma a call right after the election, before the leadership vote, and it was in this crazy period where there's just all kinds of political drama like behind the scenes everywhere playing out. And he took Sarah's call and they talked for about 5 or 10 minutes. So I think that's pretty good news for us over there. We also have some of our best allies in the Democratic side of the House that have moved up into leadership, namely Representative Melody Hernandez and Representative Marcelino Quinones, who have been very strong supporters and people that really look to be advocates, not to the industry, to learn what the best public policy is. So that's a little bit about the House. Turning to the Senate, again, it's going to be 16 Republicans and 14 Democrats. The leadership for the Senate is something that we were watching very, very closely with bated breath. That's particularly on the Republican side of that contest, where you had Warren Peterson, a Mormon from the Chandler area, very, very far right wing, going up against Senator David Gowan, who is the senator from Sierra Vista, who's really been pretty good on cannabis issues. We worked very closely with Senator Gowan during the last session. We heard from some of his associates the reason the hemp-derived cannabinoids bill died last time was that Gowan didn't want to put small businesses out of business for no good reason. So someone who I think, again, like listens to the right people and seems to have his values in the right place, not just supporting free market capitalism for everything but marijuana, but applying your values to cannabis, which is what we'd like to see from our elected leaders. So a lot of the political prognosticators going into this, after this election, were like, Gowan's got it and it's a done deal, and that was almost where everyone's money was on. I think the election happened for leadership the day after the election, and there were some unexpected things that happened, a couple of them that swung the leadership election from Senator Gowan, who, by the way, I referenced being a good candidate. He was also one of our 2 A-rated Republican Senate candidates. So him and then Justin Wadsack from Tucson. So they pushed ahead with this leadership vote, and it's kind of funky because they ended up letting people vote who didn't end up winning their races. They lost their election, but they were enabled to vote because they were in striking distance. So that meant that Nancy Bartow, a candidate in Scottsdale who lost, got to vote. She cast her vote for Peterson. Robert Scantlebury, Republican Senate candidate from the Mesa area, lost, but still got to cast a vote for Peterson. And with those 2 voting, the margin of defeat for Gowan was 1 vote. So if the 2 losers didn't get to vote, it would have been our A-rated candidate being the president of the Senate for the next probably 2 years. And because they got to vote, it's Warren Peterson. Another thing happened, so you might be wondering, like, why would Gowan have let that happen if he's going to have these losers voting on the other side? Well, the reason he let it happen is because he had another person who committed to vote for him, and if he got that vote, then despite the losers, he would have won. But some person who I won't name because she's also a very high-rated candidate for us, committed to vote for him and then stabbed him in the back and voted for Warren Peterson, and that's another reason then why Senator Gowan is senator instead of president of the Senate Gowan. So we've been watching that again. Like I said, a lot of political drama, pretty crazy stuff happening
Everybody
there.
gets a trophy.
And yeah, it's also interesting, right? Like the party that hates voter fraud let dead candidates cast votes for the president of the Senate, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But when it comes to politicians, maybe more often than we like, it's more about power than about principles. So that's what happened in the Senate. That being said, we are not overly pessimistic as we might have been in those first few days afterwards. We have been on I guess you could say, a quest to identify allies of Senator Peterson who are sympathetic to cannabis reform and are believers in capitalism, which is something that he professes. So we're hopeful, I think, cautiously optimistic that, I don't think we're going to turn Senator Peterson into a cannabis champion in the next couple of years, but that's not really what we want or need. We really just want him to let bills get voted on and not to use his pocket veto to kill good legislation.
I think he's better than Karen.
I don't know about that. I think
We'll find out.
I think you can compare him. I think the best comparison is from our, trying to figure out strategy, is to Speaker Bowers, who we were just talking about. And if you look at the 2 of them, I think there's a very good case to make that Peterson is not as bad for cannabis as Bowers was. So looking at the cannabis bills that were in the Senate last year, where Peterson was also in the Senate, you had SB 1715, not a bill that we liked, but the cannabis bill, that he voted yes on like everybody else. And then you had HB 2050, a cannabis bill that we championed, and he also voted yes on 2050. Bowers, on the other hand, was inclined to not let 2050 get introduced to the vote until I think it was someone in like the back room prevailed on him. He let it move forward, but he voted against the bill. So I think there's a little bit more kind of common sense cannabis policy with Peterson probably than with Bowers, who was really just dug in ideologically as like one of his biggest issues that he focused on. Whereas for Peterson, I think he's going to be more focused on other things, like having Wendy Rogers chair of the election committee and do things with that than he will be with
That's the
cannabis
other thing we have to show.
Mhm.
That-
What about it?
That's a weird person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's another guy, TJ Shope, who was sponsored some cannabis bills in the past. I don't know if you remember, it's a bill we didn't focus on a whole lot last year because it didn't really affect consumers all that much. But there was a cannabis bill that was going to tweak the way that funds got distributed, the tax money under Proposition 207. This bill was going to also let tribal police and university police get those funds. That was sponsored by Shope. So.
Yeah.
He has taken something of an interest in cannabis politics. However, I'll also say that like the Arizona Dispensaries Association views him as being like one of their best people down there. So not that like that's always a bad thing. And since we're talking about politics, probably also makes sense to talk about we are talking with the ABA right now about a specific bill to try to strengthen our medical program. Looking at doing a few things through that bill. If we can make this happen, I think this is exciting and something to really be pleased about. First thing that we're trying to accomplish working with them is a reduction to medical card fees across the board for everybody, whether that'll come through law or if it's going to come through rulemaking from the Department of Health Services, open question at this point. But that's one thing we're focused on, number one. Number two, also focused on steeper reductions for certain classes of patients like we talked about last year. Veterans, we're looking at trying to get that provision of 2050, the waiving of the state licensing fee back for them. Also for certain elderly populations, we're looking at number two. Third, we're looking at clearly allowing telemedicine certifications. Something I think we've talked about in the past. There are places that are doing them, but despite the fact that people are doing them, our laws also clearly say you need an in-person evaluation. So we want to fix that, give other certification companies the peace of mind that they're on the right side of the law, they can do telemedicine and help patients get cards more easily without risk. And then the last thing they're looking at doing in that bill is more just like a political thing to try to sell the bill to a conservative Senate, which is importing some of the child advertising restrictions from Proposition 207 that are already there, and then flopping those down into the Medical Marijuana Act as well. So you got Republicans and be like, look, this is a common sense bill that does different things. And really like the effect is like, I won't be able to buy gummies that look like insects. If there's anyone in the crowd who cares about that, please let me know. But it's not something that I think
It's something that people are already having to go around because most brands sell. So I mean, I really don't. It'd just be a change of packaging.
Yeah.
To some brands, which they're already using the other packaging anyway. So I mean.
Yeah. But again, we are here so you can share your concerns with me, because the kind of thing like I see that and I'm like, yeah, okay, that sounds like a reasonable compromise to strike to make this an easier sell. But if there's anyone else who cares about that stuff, and that's I want to hear what you think, because I'm not trying to pass laws that I think are good. I'm trying to pass laws that you think are good. That's the goal. Ryan, go ahead.
Does that mean gummy worms going to be available?
Of course, I was waiting for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've seen the gummy worms.
There used to be gummy worms.
They don't exist anymore.
Yeah, I don't see
Banned
them.
back in Colorado did their ban. They took them off the shelves here
Okay.
too.
Yeah, I think that's right. Because like what edible companies were doing is like, I don't want to manufacture
There
like
used
some
to be,
products
like,
for medical and
Jason
some for adult
and
use.
I have a timeless shirt that has the gummy.
I had the
No,
sour,
Jason
the
and
sour
Jason.
gummies, the regular gummies, the
Jason
two-colored
used to have
gummies,
those.
the dual flavored.
Yeah.
Like 20 teens.
Yes.
They used to have Arizona Organics. all-
But yeah, I don't view that as being a big issue. I think it's a good bargain to strike, because like we need to get the big like bottom line for cannabis legislation for folks who are a little bit newer is that you need not 50%, you need 75% to get anything done. I'd much rather live in a world with free medical cards and telemedicine and no insect worms that are gummies and infused than live in a world without any of the with worms and without the other good stuff. But
Yeah.
that's just me.
There's
You
always
have
give and
square
take when
gummies,
it
circle
comes to
gummies.
law.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Right, I don't care. It's
Gummies are
if
gummies.
it makes me feel good, that's what I'm looking
Right.
John, someone asked about the Schaefer Commission in the live. I don't know if that rings a bell.
The Schaefer Commission, man, that goes like way back, I
know
think.
about the Schaefer.
And I'm looking at like, I bet like Ron and Michael, and you guys would know more about this than I do. I feel like Schaefer Commission was like 1920s, 1930s when we were first looking at like criminalizing stuff, or like maybe it was the thing in the Nixon administration when I forgot, there was some commission that said we shouldn't be criminalizing cannabis, and Nixon overruled them. But
It was a little bit ago. It was.
It's okay, figure it out later.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're working on that one bill right now with the ADA, trying to get some of that stuff off the ground. Also, for folks who are new, this isn't a typical thing that we do working with the ADA. It's a very new thing that we're trying to do, and we're going to see how it goes.
Have you talked to them about caregiving?
About what?
Our caregiving status?
No. I mean, they don't really talk about that either. I feel like you want to speak to that, Allison?
What, caregiving?
She asked if we talked to ADA about caregiver stuff.
No, we haven't talked to ADA about caregiver stuff.
No, nor have they
We
brought it up
don't,
with
we
us.
don't want to remind the ADA caregivers exist.
Okay. That's what I did. I think that's where we were at, but I wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, you can be sure if they tried to run a bill to make caregiving like harder, like we're obviously gonna
It's
step
already
in
hard enough.
and try to
We
stop that.
know
That's so
that,
difficult.
so, yeah, no, I don't really want to talk to the ADA about caregiving, because, yeah, I don't want to remind them of caregiving. Oh, yeah, there's always that we could go, no.
Leave
better
them alone.
John.
Leave our patients alone.
Leave me alone.
Schaefer Commission was the one from Nixon.
It was, yeah, okay.
John,
They ignored it.
we have an in-depth question from a Facebooker. If you wouldn't mind taking a question, it's about law and legality, real quick.
Yeah,
So it
sure,
ties
go
in.
for it.
All right, it says, can you or some other lawyer bring a constitutional challenge to the safety-sensitive law the legislature unconstitutionally added to the AMMA? Wouldn't being successful in this suit open the availability of many thousands of Arizona residents to use medical marijuana in a job deemed safety-sensitive by their employer? Judge Lanza has already given a tentative ruling in Lee versus Albertsons that the law is unconstitutional.
Yeah, so I'm not familiar with the Levy Albertsons case, nor am I about to give direct legal advice, but I will say that, yeah, it's a really interesting issue, whether the safety-sensitive drug testing law does violate the Voter Protection Act and our cannabis initiatives, right? So like what we're talking about with VPA, the way it works is to pass a law that affects an initiative, it needs to pass by 75% in the House, 75% in the Senate, and for the purpose of the initiative. So this drug testing law, I'll say this like way predates my time joining NORML, but the drug testing law, I think, passed with 75% in both chambers. I'm not 100% on that, to be clear, but I suspect the underlying question is like, doesn't this not further the purpose of the initiative? And I think, yeah, there's a really good argument that's the case. Am I going to take this on and file a lawsuit tomorrow? I probably won't, unless there's other lawyers who want to help me or someone who can afford to pay my bills for me while I do this, because living costs money. And lawsuits take a lot of time, like we're talking hundreds of hours. But yeah, it's a great question, and I would love to have an answer to that. So hopefully we get one at some point, and maybe there's going to be more rulings coming in Levy Albertsons, I guess.
I guess we'll look into that more. I will.
I will.
Good question.
Yeah, it is a great question, and it's something that I've wondered about too. As I do like consults with people sometimes who have been terminated. There's not much case law on it. So switching gears back to politics and to legislation. So we talked about this medical bill, something that I hope we're going to see in this upcoming legislative session. Again, something that we're trying to work with the ADA on. But one of the questions that I have with this partnership is what's going to happen when we're faced with other bills and potential differences of opinions. So other things that I've heard various groups are looking at doing in this legislative session regarding marijuana. One of those, hemp-derived cannabinoids. I know Chef Turtle, Ron, Mike, a lot of you guys were around for last year when we dealt with SB 1715. SB 1715 was a bill that was going to prohibit across the entire state the manufacturing and sale of hemp-derived cannabinoids like Delta-8 THC, Delta-10 THC, THC, THCV, THCO, and then also I think hemp-derived converted Delta-9 THC, which is another thing that I think is fascinating, just because like we go into dispensaries and you buy product and you assume that it's all extracted from a marijuana plant at a cultivation site, when really a lot of the products that you're buying, vape cartridges and edibles, are not traditionally extracted THC. They are CBD that's been converted via chemical processes into delta-9 THC, and that's not being disclosed to consumers. This bill last year, though, wasn't going to solve that problem and require disclosures and let people make informed decisions for themselves. It was just going to, basically, their contention is there's safety risks here. We've got to prohibit this across the entire state or people are going to hurt themselves. One might say that, like, isn't that the rationale that we used to make marijuana illegal for the last 100 years? And I'd say, yeah, it is, and that's why it's crazy. So last year around, we fought against that. The legislature ended up not liking the bill, putting small businesses out of business. It's coming back again this time, but in a little bit of a different kind of way, and really more like they're speaking to the concerns that we raised last time, I think, about bankrupting and ending the regulated market. So this bill is going to let the regulated market for Delta 8, Delta 10 continue, at least that's what they're saying now. But it will have disclosure requirements. So when you go into a dispensary, it'll say this is converted Delta 9, converted Delta 8, originally from hemp, letting you decide if that's something you want to buy or not. And then I like my hope is that that'll make the prices of those converted products come down below where they are now. So you kind of have like a cheaper, maybe less natural option, and the more like premium, all natural kind of deal. I also believe the Hemp Industry Trade Association, though, is going to be running most likely its own competing bill that will lock in the freedoms that we have right now and effectively start regulating the unregulated Delta 8, Delta 10 market, which is, people say, happening in CBD stores and gas stations all over the state. I don't really see it much myself, but
You're not in smoke shops all the time.
you see it.
Oh my, I see it all the time.
You see Delta 9?
Yeah, it's all over the place.
Yeah.
You see Delta
I've
9
seen
there
all
too?
of it. And different
Okay.
smoke shops, just they're all different brands, and most of them I have no clue, never heard of them.
Yeah, interesting.
No.
Well, one note I will throw out there in connection with all that is like beware of it, because when you are buying on the unregulated market, like that stuff might not be getting tested or tested as well. You don't know what they're putting in there in terms of chemicals. I have a lot of chemist friends too who haven't necessarily said you can't do this stuff safely, but that you can also very easily do it in a dangerous way. So it's kind of the Wild West. It's a little bit of a free-for-all, like you were saying.
Oh, it is.
And the goal of the HEDA bill is basically to solve those problems that we were talking about, to make sure all those products are being tested, to make sure sales are only happening to adults. So basically creating a separate regulatory structure for that hemp-derived cannabinoid market. Except, unlike marijuana, there will be no cap on licenses. So it'll be low barriers to entry. If you want to get into the cannabis industry, this is a way that you can do it. Not maybe as ideal as having your own dispensary, but it's some kind of angle into the lawful
Right.
business.
Without breaking your bank.
Yeah,
At
the
the
lawful
same time.
marketplace. And I know from all my entrepreneur friends that, the headaches that go along with that, it's not an easy thing to do. So that's hemp. The ADA bill, again, is kind of where we were last year, but I think our thinking's been evolving a little bit. And I know we like more competition as opposed to less competition. So now that there's someone out there who's trying to really spend the energy and give the thought that it needs to have a comprehensive bill to regulate that market, I think we'll be curious to see what it looks like and take a vote on it. So there's those two pieces right there, things you can keep an eye on for this upcoming session. I think too, we're probably going to see another version of the social equity piece that was in 2050 to give that medical license to the adult use licenses. I'll say in full disclosure, I'm a little bit involved with that bill. I think it's going to end up being more narrow than last time though. I've been hearing concerns about a lot of people who got licenses who don't really meet the definition of social equity. Copper State, Mojave Cannabis, what have you. So the way that this bill is being drafted right now is to focus on Arizona small businesses. That's businesses whose owners live in Arizona around the year, not MSOs, and also businesses that don't already have a marijuana license in Arizona or another state. So if you are one of the little guys, you're a bona fide social equity applicant who hit the jackpot, got your license, it'll help you out, but not necessarily the corporate the big corporations that have tons and tons of money, as it is in a bunch of other licenses. So That's something else I think we could see this time. I've been hearing a lot of stuff about cannabis legislation to come in this session. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. Some things I've been hearing whispering of are, let's talk about delivery we can talk about. We just voted on that today, actually. So there's been an idea floated to allow delivery, not just from retail sites, but also from cultivation sites and manufacturing sites. Deliveries allowed to start happening in 2023 if the Department of Health Services adopts rules to allow it. It needs to start happening by January of 2025. So by doing that, right, you'll have more places that you can buy from that are within 10, 15 miles, whatever it is from your house, because they're also getting all those cultivation and manufacturing sites in there. That's giving you more options, and the more options there are for you, the more competing businesses have to do for your money, which is a good thing for your bottom line. Yeah, up in the quality or up in the price, or both. That's right. So yeah, that's one idea I've heard about. One thing I'd be curious to hear from you guys on, actually, it's an idea I've been kind of just floating in my head and considering the pros and cons of it, would be doing exclusivity for delivery for those qualified social equity businesses that are Arizona year-round and no other licenses allowed. So my thoughts for that, and this hinges on the department not going ahead and allowing delivery starting in January 1st. And I don't know, I have no idea if they plan to do that or if they plan to wait until January 2025. I'm hearing lots of rumors they're going to do January 1st, but that's, I think, impossible at this point. They need to draft rules before they can allow it. The idea would be to delay delivery for folks who already have their licenses, who aren't social equity, until 2025, and then to let social equity, like qualified social equity small businesses, start doing delivery next fall. So that way they've got like 14, 15 months with just the social equity guys doing delivery, so they can, have a little bit of an extra edge and build up some capital to expand and compete against their competition. The flip side to that, good for social equity, deserving social equity businesses, not as good for consumers, right? Because you're going to have fewer options to do delivery for the next first 14 months. So then you got to balance, like, how much do we care about social equity versus how much do I want more places that I can buy product from? So I don't know. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are if you're comfortable sharing, because there's definitely two sides to that question.
You're helping one party but hurting the patient, or you're helping the patient and basically killing the business.
And that's New York right now. I'll get to you in 1 second. So New York is like that right now. They have full exclusivity for social equity for like their entire market. And that's why you see all these stories right now of unregulated illicit sales happening in New York, is because there are no dispensaries open.
Oh, the delivery buses.
Yes, they're trying to get through this process and then give the social equity guys like the first crack at the market for like a year or two, so they can build up a bunch of money and compete against Curaleaf and Trulieve. But yeah, the flip side of that is that you gotta wait for more dispensaries to come in. So I don't know. What do you guys think about that? How much do you value it? Do you think it's better to start with to help social equity, or better to help ourselves? And I see Ryan's hand up.
Personally, I think like give it to the social equity, like the deserving social equity applicants. That as long as our current situation doesn't change, where like we have to do something different to make our purchases, I'm okay with continuing the same way I have been for the past however many years.
It's true. Yeah, you're not going to lose your ability to shop at other dispensaries that are close to your house. It's just a limited delivery option. Olivia?
We went to New York in February when they had first set up all the tables in Washington Square Park, and it was so easy to find weed. Like, it was not difficult to find weed. I think the social equity is definitely an important aspect.
Okay. Anyone else?
Would they be allowed to use platforms like DoorDash?
What was that?
Would they be allowed to use platforms like DoorDash?
Oh shoot! I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I think that DoorDash might have something to say about that.
He works at corporate DoorDash. That's why he's not.
Oh, you work for corporate with them. Okay. So yeah, here's an interesting other point that we should make about delivery. That's really worth keeping in mind when we're talking about any laws involving licensing in Arizona. Is that there is only, if we're talking adult use, one kind of license. If we're talking medical, there is one kind of license. There is not a delivery license. There's not a cultivation or manufacturing. It's one license. You buy one, you get to do whatever's legal underneath it. So like DoorDash, obviously, I know you guys are sharp. Like DoorDash can't go out and just buy a delivery license unless our laws change and create a separate class of license. I suppose in theory, DoorDash could do what Superb's been doing, which is just enter into a bunch of subcontracting agreements with dispensaries and do delivery on their behalf. But I think the bigger issue from DoorDash is probably going to be like their banking for that, because they might lose their corporate banking access if they start doing marijuana stuff. But
We have a program that just integrates into established order platforms, and we don't really, this doesn't go through DoorDash, we just provide the drivers.
So
Okay.
they would do all the finance.
Huh.
Yeah, that's cool.
I think you need to come to more meetings.
Yeah. We need to start coming to some more meetings.
I want to say, we get requests all the time to have these companies on DoorDash. They're asking us, and
Yeah,
we have to deny them, unfortunately.
that's interesting.
That sounds like there could be some corporate backing for a delivery bill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I got a question about this.
Sure, go ahead.
What about capping? If we're taking it out of the social equity platform, are we exclusively getting these delivery licenses, or whoever's ready for a delivery license, some of those social equity numbers that we're gonna get?
I don't know if I caught that.
Yeah.
You say
Like
capping?
our licensing cap, so.
Yeah, they coming from.
Yeah, where are these licenses gonna come out of?
Oh, that's a very good question.
So delivery licenses. So we're
Yeah,
talking
if
about.
we brought social equity in first and they were exclusively delivery,
Yeah.
we couldn't open up shop yet.
Yeah, so here's the way it would work. Like there are no separate delivery licenses that are going to get issued later. Like they've already got the license that will, the social equity folks that is already have the license that will give them the right to
That will
deliver.
allow them.
It's just a matter of the Department of Health Services adopting rules to let them deliver. That's when like it opens up. So the department could adopt rules that let social
So
equity
would it
deliver, but
inhibit
not the
further
others.
social equity, like cultivation sites or processing sites, that kind of stuff?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. You said delivery coming from those sites.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the idea.
There's only a certain amount based upon how many pharmacies there are. There's
Yeah.
not more pharmacies being built, so the number's not gonna go up.
Yeah,
That's right.
exactly, that's what I'm
Yeah,
saying,
you're,
yeah.
there are not gonna increase. They're gonna come out of.
Yeah.
Out
should
of
come
what's
they come out of the
existing.
community programs that are actually, ones that are, I would think in the outside towns and stuff that got screwed, that's where they're coming from.
And it's still like 15% of 300, so we're capped at a certain number, that's what.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, it's like Jim said, there's one license.
Of that number, and those are going down. They're not building more pharmacies, they're
Right.
not putting more brick and mortar pharmacies. It's going more down, online. That's why they wrote it that way.
That's
So
what
the
I thought.
numbers here will go down.
Well, so that's where I'm really glad you brought that up because we did just get new information since our last meeting about the pharmacy count. There's actually a medical allocation that's coming up in the next like week, 2 weeks for medical marijuana rural dispensary licenses. We've all been watching this pharmacy number, and I assume you all know this, but you know our dispensaries in Arizona, our marijuana business licenses are limited. 1 license for every 10 pharmacies in the state. Our first allocation was like 2010, 2011, 6 years later, 2016 roughly, there was another pretty substantial allocation. So I was waiting to see, are we going to see a big increase between 2016 and 2022 like we saw between 2010 and 2016? That didn't happen. I've been hearing for a while from pretty well-connected folks that they thought there'd be like 20 new pharmacies, well, like 80 new pharmacies, which would be enough for the 6 rural county licenses to go out and then 2 licenses that aren't tied to those rural counties. But that was wrong. And there was only, I think, 60 new pharmacies that opened in the last 6 years, which is a bad number. And that means
it's decreased dramatically too in the last 2 years. I don't believe that the pharmacy, especially with the COVID thing, are going with brick and mortar.
Yeah, someone suggested to me that what's been happening is we've all been moving more towards like fulfillment of online orders for scripts, and that means brick and mortar dispensaries are stagnating or slightly going down. Based on the rate of increase over the last 6 years, your next allocation of adult use licenses, if this rate continues, will be after the year 2100. So we've got about a century to go.
Wouldn't they go with something that, you know, I know Michigan does it and I mean, New Mexico's doing it too, is going to a micro-license form.
Yeah, and the macro and
Getting down to
micro.
where you're supplying more of the people that can create edibles, that can create concentrates, that aren't the growers that, you know, are utility helping, which it brings more product into the market, which reduces the prices. I mean, they should reduce the price anyway, trust me, we've already done this before. How much money's getting off of it. But that's the only thing that I think you guys would go after would be something that expands, or because that's not written, that the micro-licenses aren't written in there, and so it's something that can be moved, but nothing's written in. So.
Yeah, I mean, we've been, of course, talking with that. We spoke with you for the last meeting a while ago
You know,
about that.
you know, they're not going to move for that.
Huh?
Dispensaries are not going to go for that. That's
No, they will not go for that, and we'll have to fight them for
They'll
that.
fight tooth and nail on that one.
Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
Hey, just out of curiosity, so if the number of the number of pharmacies that keeps dropping, they start going away. Could that potentially mean that the department, if they wanted to, could start reducing the amount of actual?
be a hell of an argument in court as well as this, as well as the
I mean, I know that, but,
house.
you know.
Yeah, I don't think you're gonna see that happen. I mean, they don't have rights to do license revocations when pharmacy counts go down. I mean, folks have a private property interest in their license, and the department can't take it away without having legal grounds for doing that.
Cool.
But yeah, it's obviously the cap is very problematic, and those folks who've been coming to our meetings for a long time know that we probably talk about it every single meeting in one way or another, because yeah, it's the number one thing that's holding back Arizona's industry, and it's also, I think, the number one reason why, looking at someone who's been living in a lot of different states, why our prices are so much higher than much of the rest of the country is that in other places around the country, you have businesses that compete for consumers, and in Arizona, you have one dispensary that's relatively close by to you that you can drive to, maybe two if you got some more flexibility in your day. So there's not much risk that you're going to bail if they jack up their prices. They'll just charge you with the unregulated market charges, and you'll go for the nice shiny retail experience, you know. But again, I think that's a very separate issue from what we were talking about and how we launched on that discussion, because having delivery rights and when we triggered the right to deliver is very different than just creating new licenses. But yeah, that being said, though, Jim's point about cultivation manufacturing licenses, I didn't mention that as a bill that I think we're going to see this year, but it's one of the things that we've probably spent the most time talking about, allowing for there to be standalone cultivation and manufacturing licenses, so we don't have a situation where someone like comes to us, hey, I want to start, you know, cultivation business, I've been doing home grow, and you know, I've got a real talent and a passion for this, and how do I do it? And the answer is, well, you know, you got to buy a dispensary license for $7 to $10 million, or you can operate under one and pay $15,000 to create a product that you don't get to own. Then
Yeah.
that's not a great situation for an entrepreneur to be in. So that's what we're looking very, very closely at, whether it's through a referendum or whether it's through a traditional kind of bill. I do think there's a lot of appetite at the legislature for trying to unwind some of the oligopoly's power. Most of the Democrats I speak to don't like seeing large concentrations of wealth in the hands of a few. Most Republicans I see don't like legalized drug cartels, which is how they'll describe the ADA. So yeah, it's interesting. I think we'll have an exciting session ahead of us with a lot of the bills that I just rattled through, and I'm sure it's never a legislative session without surprises. So I imagine we'll see some of those, like the temporary rebranding bill again, and
I'm
THC
so
caps.
looking forward to this.
what was that?
THC caps.
Yeah.
That's always a
Last
possibility,
session was pretty boring.
relatively speaking.
Yeah, well, I mean, we didn't have the number of cannabis bills that we normally have. I think
Yeah.
everybody was busy with other topics.
Yeah.
So this session should be a lot more lively.
Last year, I feel like was lively until the end, and then like by the end, most of the bills have dropped off. I remember last year we had HB 2082, the advertising bill. We had the bill that was going to stop social equity owners from ever selling their license ever. We had a bill that was going to move the Department of Health Services, stop it from regulating cannabis. We had the hemp bill. We had the rural county backfill bill. It's just like a lot of those dropped away.
I know. I was thinking of my updates. My updates were.
Yeah, by the end, they were all gone because
My
most of those
update
bills
was
went nowhere.
definitely harder in 2021 than it was in 2022.
Yeah.
So.
2021 was big. I mean, that was kind of like
Yeah.
us walking in.
So I'm
talking
kind
to
of
a seven.
expecting us to have like a repeat of 2021. I think we're gonna have a lot of cannabis bills, but we'll be a little bit more seasoned.
So everybody join us is what they're saying.
Pretty much, yeah. Actually,
The
that's
more
what we're
faces,
gonna
the
do.
better.
Yeah, that's a great point because yeah, we do want you to help us joining RTS, helping sign up for RTS. Allison, you.
My favorite thing to talk about.
Go ahead.
RTS stands for request to speak, but it doesn't mean you have to speak. It just means that you give a thumbs up, neutral, or a thumbs down. And politicians really, really look at how many people are signed in for and against a bill. It's the most easiest thing you can do. You can do it from the comfort of your home once we sign you up at the kiosk. And it's pretty fun. And then you can track other things that you're into. I don't know, abortion rights or whatever you're into, you can, research and follow and track. And I put out a pretty in-depth article last year that was really nerdy. If you want to go and look at it again,
You should.
yeah, that's.
Yeah, I kind of view RTS as being like Facebook for politics, and that like instead of having your like heart emoji and your thumbs up emoji and your anger face emoji, you have yes, no, or neutral. And then you like in Facebook, you can comment on people's posts. You can also comment on bills and share your ideas about how they should be improved, whatever. And it is really easy in terms of like getting involved in politics and like really moving the needle. This is probably one of the easiest things that you can do. It's really as simple as you just give Allison or me.
We're gonna start a sign up sheet. We're gonna have one. I think Janae was talking about having a thing on our website.
Yeah, with name, email address.
Name and email address.
Yeah, all we need is your name and your email address. We'll take the trouble of going down to the Capitol for you, going to the kiosk, getting you all signed up and everything. And then from there, it's kind of like stay posted. We'll shoot out emails and stuff about certain bills and share our thoughts on them. You just log on to RTS and type in the name like HB 2050. Thumbs up. I like this bill, and you're done. And that, like, again, matters a lot. Like, it's almost kind of silly. Like, it seems like how much this stuff matters. Like, emails to your legislators, that also matters a lot. You might not believe it, but on both sides of the question, we had a bunch of Democrats, and we had talked to them last year about 2050. Like, oh my God, there's so many emails. People are all over this bill and so focused on it. Republicans are like, tell your marijuana people to stop smoking. That's literally what happened from our veterans email that we sent out. So that stuff actually matters a lot. Like your legislators really are paying attention, despite what you hear on TV. Like they actually really do care what you think too, with the exception of the one guy who's like, tell your marijuana people to stay out of my inbox. But they're pretty few and far between. And it also like makes us a lot more effective too when we're down there, right? Because like if we're just a group of 5 people, then like sure they'll be nice and care what we have to say, but if we're a group of 5 people that has hundreds of other people behind us who are going to, do things like make phone calls and turn out voters and kick out the bums who are passing bad bills that take away your rights, they're going to think a little bit more carefully about how they approach cannabis politics in the future. I think there's some perception, and there has been for a long time. Maybe this is changing a little bit, but it's just like classic kind of like pothead perception, right? Which is like these people are lazy. They don't vote. They don't tune in. Like, yeah, they want all these things. They're not going to do anything to try to get them. And so that's why RTS, if you go in there, and we've heard this directly, is that people don't thumb up cannabis bills. Cannabis consumers don't care. This is what legislators think about all of you, about all of us. And again, we've heard that directly. So you go on there and you thumb it up. If there's like 30 people who thumbed up a bill, we walk into that room. We're like, yeah, people are all over this. They're fired up. They're signing into RTS. They're expressing their opinions. They're going to be focused on this when the election comes. And if you want some people to knock on doors for you, or you don't want them to knock on doors for your opponent, you better pay attention and do what your voters are asking you to do. So would definitely encourage you to do all of that. If you all are interested, you can either just stop by after after we're done with the more formal part of the meeting. I'll take your name and your email address, and we'll get down there and get you signed up.
I think after the start of the new year, right before the session starts, it'd be great to have a little training session for whoever wants to learn how to use RTS and actually go through the process. I know we did it last year.
That could just be our next meeting, really.
Yeah.
If you guys are all up for that, just do an RTS training meeting. AJ?
I just wanted to add that this is really, really the part of the organization that I enjoy the most, is of, for, and by the people of our government. That this is the part that needs the most amount of help, because this is what changes laws. This is what makes laws. It's us, it's you, it's all of us coming together and telling they're not leaders, they're our elected officials that do what we say, or at least they're supposed to, but they have to hear from us. This is the part I get really fired up about every time. It's like, we got this, you gotta speak up, every single one of us. So,
yeah,
and it's fun.
It is. It's fun, and it really does, again, make a very, very big difference. I can't overstate that enough, as much as I'm just drilling it. So yeah, if you want to come up today, you can take your name and your email address down. We'll get you an RTS account. We'll all talk as a board, maybe look at doing an RTS training next week. We can kind of take over this TV, probably 15 minutes, easy to do. And yeah, and we're a little bit past 8, I think. So anything else, Allison?
No, I'm good. Or wait, well, Janae, I forgot to tell you you're doing events.
Right, on the spot.
You're on the spot
It'll be a
today.
team effort. It will be a team effort. I know
I know
that.
there's no meeta this month.
No meetup this month, but Canna Friends is next Wednesday. Very excited for that. And there's the Tom's Palms Toy Drive. What
Sunday.
day? Sunday.
12 to 4:20.
This Sunday?
This Sunday.
Thank you.
This Sunday. And then the rest of the year, we'll keep you guys posted on Instagram. If not, but those are the only two. We talked about it today as well. And it's kind of low key this December, but I think we'll kick off start of the year in January with a lot
I've
of
seen
events.
more pop-up shops than events going on this month.
Yeah.
Getting those holiday gifts.
Is that like Chief and Chill? You ever go there?
Yeah, there's a pop-up at Oasis.
Chief and Chill?
Yeah.
I've heard of it. I
Oh,
don't think I've
thanks.
had
That's all I
it.
got.
What is
Wait,
Have you
we
gone there? Have you gone there?
No.
Is that it?
I like
I
that.
think we're
That's
done.
it.
Peace, people. Say goodbye, John, to the live.
Bye.
We're done.
Love, peace, and cannabis.
Todd got me covered.
Say bye, everyone.
Love, peace, and cannabis.
The date will be.
You got your
yes. All right.
All right, thanks for coming, y'all.
Thanks.
Yep.
You
Appreciate
Smile,
We could have sworn you were around for us last time.
No, I'm just running the meetings.
Yeah.
What is he on? I know, like,